Hello, everyone. Welcome to OZ Voices, where we discuss all things opportunity zones, whether it's rural, urban, suburban, or industrial. We're happy to have you with us today. We are honored today to have Chris Pilkerton as a guest. We're going to start with our introductions, and I would love to tee it over to him. Chris, please go
Hi,
ahead.
Anna. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, as you know, I'm the former general counsel and acting administrator at the Small Business Administration. During my time at the SBA, I had the opportunity to travel across the country to see wonderful small businesses and amazing entrepreneurs. And a lot of those were in opportunity zones. So it really was a pleasure to spend time with them to figure out what they were doing, how they were impacting the community. And in my current work, working with your organization and opportunity zones, as well as some other areas, I've had the chance to see how this larger financial ecosystem really can help take advantage of this wonderful tool.
Absolutely, yes. And Chris was down at the Liberty University conference that was hosted last week. We were talking about all things opportunity zones, other topics as well. But we were so fortunate to have three distinct strong panels looking at the ecosystem of opportunity zones. And Chris was on one of those panels. We had government officials from across the administration in the Trump administration that were there discussing the history that we had in opportunity zones, where we are today and where we are going in the future. We wanted to talk about that panel. I wanted to turn it over to Chris and get his insight. What information did he want to share that day, and why was it so important to be shared? Go ahead.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the incredible impact that opportunity zones have in underserved communities. And these areas obviously were selected by governors. And so the panel really focused on kind of a cross-reference of regulatory activity, legal activity, but then also practical activity, which was really great. The questions were fantastic. The crowd was very energetic and excited about opportunity zones. And my big takeaways were that the key for opportunity zones is really tapping into those communities. Like, those communities were selected for a reason, and sort of finding out what's the vision for those communities. Talking to the mayors, talking to the city councils, and talking to civic leaders to determine what they want, because it really ends up being a partnership with the Opportunity Zone Fund, the businesses that are starting there, and of course the communities themselves. And for me, it was particularly interesting because from some of the organizations that I've had a chance to work with, I've seen that a lot of these funds can learn a lot from the history of these communities. So you may find a community that's a port community. Well, if you end up having some kind of business technology that could help them with logistics or shipping or something like that, there's a ready-made marriage and opportunity for a business there. And as we all know, if you can get that anchor company, right, which obviously includes the locality, the business, and then also the investors, if you can get that anchor company, then you can begin to really develop the affordable housing piece, and of course the additional small business piece that comes with that doesn't necessarily get funded by the Opportunity Zone Fund. But that's where the ecosystem comes into play. So you're talking about community banks, you're talking about community development financial institutions, and other small business lenders that can help really build that out. And so the opportunity to work with all of those groups as part of the ecosystem is really critical to the process.
Absolutely. We talk about the conversations that need to occur within those communities all the time. And I agree with you that at first blush, it doesn't necessarily feel natural to take an idea, a business idea that someone may have, and walk into lots of other conversations where people don't know the full vision of your project and start to peel that back and work on it together, and tapping into the hopes and dreams of a community and what they would like to see. And I love that anchor company that can provide the strength for all of these other conversations that can move around it. And I know that you traveled all over the country working on opportunity zones, looking around. I would love it, and maybe North Carolina or some of the visits that you made. how can we weave some of that together? Because I think it's so important for all of us to really accept and be ready to do right.
No, absolutely. I think what you see is a couple of different components. So, the anchor companies, as you mentioned, are the ones that can provide those jobs to really help, attract people into these areas. There's also anchor projects as well. There's the New Market Tax Credit, which is another program associated with CDFIs, where you have sort of large projects that are happening. And so you have impact investors already focused in that area, which is obviously an attraction for opportunity zones. And you made reference to North Carolina. That was a place that I'd spent a fair amount of time really focused on the apparel industry, which obviously, as we all know, textiles were incredibly huge in North Carolina for much of the growth of America. But with a lot of outsourcing, a lot of those jobs had left North Carolina. And so there were components of advanced manufacturing that were looking to bring that back, both from a technology perspective, a systems perspective, and then a jobs perspective, obviously, most importantly, working with large companies to bring back apparel, furniture, and things like that. So, but my point is that a lot of that was sort of rooted in the community in North Carolina. There was a lot of expertise in building those things, a lot of furniture companies, hosiery companies, all these kinds of things where you had generations of talent and understanding. And so you've got a ready-made workforce there, not to mention the fact that you have a tremendous university system. So those groups can actually work very closely with the state universities, the community college and junior college system to help train folks, and not just train them to jobs, but also to become entrepreneurs. And so obviously there's a ton of opportunity through SBA programs, other small business programs, Minority Business Development Agency, and other groups that can really add to that on top of the educational pieces.
Could talk about that for the next hour. I'm sure that we don't have time for that today, but perhaps in the future. Weaving together everything that you have just covered and connecting that to the conference, I was so inspired by the energy in that room. We talk about the program that was created. It's not a top-down federal program, as we all know, but those of us who worked in the administration, we helped create some of the dynamics and the nuances that we're working with today. To be in that room that day and all the panels on opportunity zones, seeing that energy that was present and in the front, the exchanges that we had, was very inspiring. When we look forward to opportunity zones and what's coming next, what do you see? And that will be our final thoughts for the day, and we'll pick it up another time.
So what I see really, and I think it was embodied in that conference, you had a lot of people in the room that were generally described as stakeholders, right? They were small businesses, they were entrepreneurs, they were investors working with funds, they were community and civic leaders. And in my experience, and I was able to, with your help, host a number of these events when I was over at the SBA, is really getting everyone in a room and seeing what works. These opportunity zones, it's a big name. There's a lot of legislation, associated with it, a lot of rules and regs associated with it. But at the end of the day, it's sitting down and figuring out what works for your community. So whether it's an in-person event like we had at Liberty, or a virtual event where people can really share ideas and engage directly, that's where the work gets done. And that's what I'm excited to be a part of.
And there is more to come. That was very clear throughout the conference, and it was very exciting. So I think for today, we're going to thank Chris Pilkerton for his time. I would like to do that. Thrilled to have him here. We'll have lots of activity. As we all know, it's happening across the country every day. And we're going to capture those moments and bring them into the conversation from our perspective. So we look forward to having Chris back in the future. Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna. I appreciate being here.